In this section of the course, we're going to look at the topics related to preparation for digital evidence examination. Also, in-depth look at autopsy hash lookup, ingest module, and in general review our hash computation skills with respect to autopsy and other tools. And of course, we have a corresponding laboratory exercise to complete as well. So let's proceed to our first presentation related to the preparation for the evidence examination. So summary highlights of any evidence examination is going to be authorization and preparation, which is happening before you get access to the actual evidence. Somebody has to authorize your access, and then you need to be able to think about the steps that you need to execute before going on location and start gathering the evidence. Then, of course, on location, you need to be able to identify the evidence. And as soon as you identify it and you begin your collection or seizure, depending on your organization, the preservation or chain of custody begins from that point on in criminal investigations, and similar documentation process also begins in civil cases. So then, as you already collected the evidence now, you can start your examination. One highlight of collection that typically you have only one chance to do the collection, and you need to do it correctly, and you need to do it within the parameters of your authorization documentation, and therefore it's very important to prepare for this very important event. So examination is based on what you have collected, and your analysis include your searches and finding information, bookmarking different types of information, and it largely depends on the type of the course that you're handling. That could be ranging from criminal investigation to accounting fraud. So there could be all sorts of analysis types that you need to be able to complete, and different types of expertise as well. So reconstruction generally is that you need to be able to reconstruct the chain of events that led to a specific incident that you're trying to investigate. And that involves also working with timeline and be able to attach events that you find evidence of in your case in different data sources potentially, to attach all of this to a consistent timeline so that it's most successfully presented as evidence if it can be presented in the form of sequence of events occurred over time. So reporting, of course, also doesn't start at the bottom of your list of things, but rather reporting begins with your initial documentation of the evidence collection. And then, of course, you need to be able to keep track of your examination steps and the different types of analysis, different use of different tools that you employ in your investigation. And therefore, then you'll be in great shape to be able to write your report. Now, also realize that at the final stages of your reporting, when you're writing your conclusions, when you're just basically finalizing everything, just be prepared that sometimes your case may be shelved for a few months. So you definitely need to be able to not just keep the final report, but also your notes. Because if you have your notes with you, then you can successfully reproduce all the examination and analysis steps that you've taken earlier in your investigation. A few words about your authorization or a search warrant. So your evidence will be severely weakened if the Fourth Amendment privacy laws were violated somehow. In civil cases, written authorization from the opposing counsel, from the attorney representing the organization, is needed before gathering digital evidence that is related to your investigation. A search warrant, of course, is issued by a judge in a court, and it needs to be in place before the evidence can be seized, before the evidence can be collected. And obtaining a search warrant can be time-consuming, but very, very necessary in a criminal investigation. There are special trainings for writing affidavits specifying probable cause of the evidence in a crime committed. So valid search warrant must particularly describe the property to a good detail and establish this probable cause for seizing any kind of property. And on this page we have a sample language of a search warrant that is very specific to a computer system that could be used for certain access or other actions in order to produce information or search for information or communicate with someone. So it's very, very specific, and it lists the probable findings that you're expected to find in that computer system. And you are looking for authorization to seize and transport the computer system and other devices, as well as computer documentation and data that everything contains, to a specific location for your forensic examination. So this is basically the content and the essence of the search warrant that you're looking for. So with this type of protection, now you're all set to start collecting, first obviously identifying and then collecting the evidence. And in a criminal case, especially, the investigators are authorized to collect and examine the evidence. But that collection and examination is really limited to only the probable cause specified and established by the affidavit. So even in a simple case of a personal computer, there were multiple situations where mistakes were made, and the searches of hard drives and other types of media were greatly exceeded the scope of a search warrant, and therefore the evidence had to be eventually dismissed. So sometimes investigators come across the situation known as plain view, and plain view basically is an exception of search warrant requirements. So basically, for instance, you become a witness to a crime being committed. So then, of course, something happens in your plain view and you become a witness. And then you should be authorized without the search warrant to take an action. However, it's not always clear what the plain view constitutes and what it means when dealing with computers. Sometimes it can be very difficult to establish that sort of probable cause by simply saying, I saw something on somebody else's screen. So there's an example of a plain view consideration, which I'm going to skip in our presentation, but I would encourage you to read this information about this specific case. So the affidavit for a search warrant is an incredibly important document, and it provides the path to obtaining a search warrant, and it definitely has to include the description of how the search will be conducted, and that includes the location and what exactly you're looking for. So if hardware is going to be seized, this should be noted and explain why is it necessary to perform an off-site examination. Okay, so basically the question that you need to be answer convincingly, why is it you need to collect something and take it to your lab for examination. So you have to protect yourself and your organization against criticisms that may be taking hardware away while not authorized. And of course, if you destroy something or break something or make something unusable anymore, you may be financially liable for the damages. So therefore, once again, I need to be able to develop and follow very closely policy and procedures of your organization to protect every step in your seizure. And another important information that should be present in the affidavit is how the digital evidence examination will be performed. Basically, you need to describe in a very brief form how you're going to process computer hardware and search for digital evidence. In preparation for your initial data collection, you should be able to conduct pre-search briefings that would present a very detailed plan on how to identify, collect, and preserve any electronic evidence that you're expecting to find at the location. So you need to focus on every role of every member of your search team, and so that they need to be able to know how to identify and protect the integrity of the data. So of course, remember to collect traditional types of evidence such as fingerprints on the keyboard, and before you touch anything, it is also very highly recommended that you photograph and videotape the entire crime scene or whatever location you're processing, so that you should be able to find out from your own records how everything was positioned, where everything was connected, all the cables, all the devices, how they were attached, and so forth. And normally one person is designated to take charge of all evidence to simplify the chain of custody. So basically a specific person will be, specific person's name will be used on the original chain of custody when you collect the evidence. That's just a very standard practice. And in most cases you have only one chance to collect the digital evidence at the specific location within the scope of your search warrant. So of course you have to practice and prepare quite well, and that is related to the entire team of investigators and examiners that will be present at the evidence collection.